Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Mary Bassett and thank her once again for her leadership on everything since she took office. It's been extraordinary to work with you, Dr. Bassett. And we're going to be talking about COVID in a couple minutes, monkeypox, as well as abortion. So you certainly have a lot on your plate, but we truly appreciate all the work that you do. Caitlin Doyle is also here, the Director of Women's Health Programs for Long Island Jewish Medical Center. We'll be hearing from her, as well as the room is filled up with amazing individuals who represent, whether it's Planned Parenthood or healthcare organizations that are providing abortion. We just had a very productive roundtable, and I'll recap that in a few minutes. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, COVID continues to be ever present. This is something that we had talked about in the past, about doing everything we can to be prepared for new variants, and we just had a meeting on that issue as well this morning, as we're having regular updates on what is going on. The new very, very, very contagious variants, BA4 and BA5, are very much around us. Now you look at the numbers, we track the numbers all the time. We're at about 33 per 100,000, which is not that much higher than it was a month ago, 26 a month ago. Here in New York City, though, it's 45 per 100,000, and a month ago it was 38. So we're still trending. We had gone down, going back up again a little bit, but we also track hospitalizations. I mean, I want to know how many people are being hospitalized. How severe is this? Is it a nuisance? Is it a real problem? Are people dying? People being hospitalized? And so the number on that, the hospitalization, the 7-day average for hospitalization, really is just about what it was a month ago. It's about 11 right now per 100, or 11.2%. 10.6 here in the city and in the state. So we're not doing poorly in that front, and thankfully the deaths remain very low, and that is something that is important to us. So again, we know what to do. Vaccinations, and about 78% of New Yorkers of the total population eligible are fully vaccinated. Always can do more on the booster front. What is your excuse? They're available. 53% of New Yorkers have been totally boosted. So we've made real efforts, we've made real progress, but I'm also going to talk about the fact that treatment is important as well. I mean, people who contract COVID also are eligible to receive therapeutics now. That is a good thing. We didn't have that early on. So to just lessen the severity, lessen your symptoms, and just get you through it, we have therapeutics, but a lot of people have barriers. They don't know where to get them. You know, what is this all about? And a lot of people just don't have a regular health care provider in the state. So yesterday, proud that we launched a new free hotline. So every New Yorker can contact one of our treatment centers here in New York City. You have a phone number, 212-COVID-19. That's clever. And outside of New York City, it's 888-TREAT-NEW YORK. So that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you test positive, we have a lot of test kits. I know because I ordered 92 million of them. We have plenty of test kits in our state. We also want to let you know that there are therapeutics that can help you get through that. That's what I availed myself of, and I didn't have too many symptoms when I tested positive on Mother's Day this year. I'll never forget that. So we have the phone numbers for you there, and also I want to thank New York City Health and Hospitals for their partnership. We're also launching a media effort, $1 million, a paid media effort to let New Yorkers know the facts about COVID still. Don't be immune to this. It's still ever present. Also, the options they have for treatment. It's running in English and in Spanish, TV, radio, online. So we're reminding everybody it's summertime. The numbers tend to go down a little bit more in the summer when everybody's outside. And fall and school are just around the corner. So parents, things have changed since your kids may have been in school. Now children 5 and up can get that shot. We're working on younger children. So please get your kids vaccinated before they go back to school in the fall. We just want to get through less disruptions than we've been experiencing. And so it's still with us. We're on top of it. We're not changing our policies at this time, always reserving the right to do so. I will always reserve the right, but right now we just want to have people be smart and, would recommend in various settings, including transportation. We want everyone to wear a mask on their public transportation, on the trains and on the subways. So let's stay on top of that. And then, of course, when we're dealing with COVID, our Department of Health isn't busy enough. We're now dealing with, as we talked about for a couple weeks now, monkeypox. Total cases statewide is 238. They are very, very, very concentrated in New York City. Of course, we have a website to get information, but New York City has 223 of the 238 cases. Westchester has about 7. Sullivan, Chemung, Rockland, Suffolk has 4. The first 3 have 1. Nassau County is 1. And so it's something we're concerned about. It's rare. It's a viral infection that does not usually cause serious illnesses, but rarely fatal. But it's very unpleasant. You can end up with permanent scarring as a result, extremely painful. So at this time, no deaths have been reported from monkeypox. We hope that stays the way it is. But I did talk to the White House about this, Dr. Jha, who's leading the response for the White House, and I said we need more treatment. We need more vaccine allocations here in New York State. I pointed out that we have vulnerable populations. We have a lot of activity out in places like Long Island, Fire Island. We have a lot of concern about some of our neighborhoods. So last week the federal government gave us 8,915, I believe it was. They gave us case, and I said, okay, we have a large population, but they're limited as well. Apparently there's one provider. It's in Europe, supply chain issues, so I heard all about it, but they expect to get a much larger supply in the near future. I think it was a quarter million doses for them. And I'm pleased to announce today that the DOH will be distributing an additional 5,180 vaccine doses. About 1,750 will go to Suffolk County. I know Northwell has set up a facility on Fire Island. Appointments are currently full, we're told, but we encourage local residents to keep checking. About almost 1,500 to Westchester, 1,200 to Nassau, and 620 to Saratoga County. So we're tracking our vulnerable areas. We're getting the doses there based on smart allocation, but we truly, truly wish we had more. New York City received their own allocation from the CDC, about 14,500. That's good news. And I know that New York City will be releasing more appointments at 1 o'clock today. So I've been waiting, check in at 1 o'clock. So that'll allow more people to, have access to it. But if you suspect you have it, make sure you see your provider. It is contagious. And we also launched a public relations or public education campaign about this. But what I conveyed to the White House is that we've received about 14% of doses allocated nationwide, but we have more than 14% of the nation's cases, so we're going to continue to press for more doses so we can continue to be on top of this as well. Thank you, Dr. Bassett, for yet another healthcare crisis, but you're up for it, and I thank you and your entire team for what you do. So speaking of healthcare crises, this one's hard to still talk about. The realization that with the reversal of Roe v. Wade just a short time ago, they stripped away the rights of millions of women. It is hard for me to stand here as the grandmother of a 2-month-old and realize that my granddaughter has fewer rights than I had. That was never the trajectory of our country. Rights were always expanded, and now we have a different dynamic. But we fight back. New York State, we're not going backwards, and I made a promise to New Yorkers and women all across this country. Any woman in need of health care, reproductive health care, will be welcome with open arms here in New York State, and I intend to keep that promise. We talk about our history. 1970, 3 years before the rest of the nation, a Republican legislature, I love to point that out, a Republican-dominated legislature, Republican governor, ensured that women had the right to reproductive decision-making over their own bodies. They had control back in 1970, 3 years before the rest of the nation. In that time, women across the nation in search of health care, reproductive health care, came to New York. We had over 400,000 abortions were provided, 2/3 of which were to people out of the state. So why do I tell you that? Well, fast forward to 2022. We may be in a similar situation. In fact, we are in a similar situation where, as we call around and talk to providers around the state, places like Western New York are seeing a major increase in women from Pennsylvania, which has more restrictions, Ohio, we're seeing a surge of cases from elsewhere. They're coming now to our providers. And we saw this, we knew this would happen, not just from 1970, just common sense told us they're going to come here. And so right before as I mentioned before this press event, I had the opportunity to meet with some of the leaders in this, and we talked about their challenges and the conversations they're having with providers, and they're contemporaries in other states. And there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of anxiety, and fear of legal prosecution. So we raised some issues. We talked about some issues about training. For someone being trained in the medical profession in some of those states, part of their residency training means that they would have to be, performing abortions, have exposed contact to actual live patients, not just in a textbook. And what role can New York State play in helping continue people's education? What other role can we play in people who now, and there are cases where people have had to close their practices in other states because there's not going to be any more patients, welcoming them here to the state of New York. Are there barriers to that? If there are barriers, what are they? How we get through them? Certification from state education department, conversations with them about how we can reduce some of the barriers for doctors who are in other states that are seeking to continue their work. So these are the individuals on the front lines, and I thank you for what you've done, and we're going to continue the conversations. We had our first approach, but we're going to continue refining New York State's response in light of more information and more data, and making sure that we are always here to ensure that we're doing everything possible. And part of that was funding. We announced this early on before the decision was clear. We saw their intent was telegraphed with the leaked memo. We had over $35 million, and that's from Commissioner Bassett's funds, $10 million of which is for security. That's a no-brainer. We know vulnerabilities. I'm from Buffalo. Dr. Bernard Slepian is still very much in the hearts and minds of people who live in Western New York. So we know there's vulnerabilities at facilities, people's homes, and so we're prepared to protect people with security. $25 million also to launch the Abortion Provider Support Fund, the largest of its kind in the nation. And so our conversation today was about how this can be used to help people. So today we are announcing the first $10 million of actual grants to the providers, where they're going, and those will go to 13 organizations with 63 facilities and clinics across the state. And many of them were represented here today talking about how they're going to be able to do more hiring and expand their operations and how they're anticipating this. So now it's official. As of today, the first $10 million is out there. We want them to hire more people. And as I heard today, great appreciation for this funding, but we appreciate what you're doing. And it's a shame we needed to do this, but we did it. And again, that's part of our effort to be proactive and have provider-centered care work that's being done so importantly. So we're going to continue doing that. Dr. Bassett, I thank you for holding the roundtables around the state as well. We're going to get you all over, getting a grasp on what the localities need. Again, some of those that are the border communities are going to see more, but other ones might be flying in, through our airports. So then you're going to see more of a concentration in New York City. So we'll be monitoring what's happening as some of the states that have trigger laws that have not gone into effect yet. So we're at the cusp of this. We're at the very beginning of what we believe will be a major influx of people in search of women's health care. And so we also want to continue expanding. So we're going to be announcing $15 million will be announced in our phase 2 of the fund. These will be given to independent clinics. The first wave was $10 million to organizations we already had contracts with, so it was easier for us to allocate the money, but obviously we do this correctly. There's contracts involved, so our round 2 grants are going to be, we're going to be open up to solicitations next week, so we want to get that word out. And I mentioned the security grants as well. So that's what we're going to keep doing, focusing on our providers, but also, just to recap, we're working to help women in every way we can. Part of that was enshrining abortion rights in our state constitution. The first steps were taken along those lines. We, here's the executive chamber calling upon, while they were considering the gun legislation, another whole topic. We'll be talking about that later this week. I took the opportunity while we had the legislature convened for an extraordinary session, that's what it's called, an extraordinary session, to consider this amendment. So we passed they passed the Equality Amendment, and that'll address health care and reproductive autonomy, and these rights will remain. This was really important to all of us. So I'm also partnering with the federal government, making sure that President Biden knows our concerns. We just did a call with him 2 weeks ago now, and he wanted key governors to give a reflection of what we're up to, and also to hear what he's doing. And I'm glad to see that the President is directing HHS to consider providing and increasing access for over-the-counter contraceptions. It's shocking to realize you can't get them over the counter. And in consultation with Dr. Bassett, I'm here to say that New York State 100% fully supports over-the-counter contraception. Let's be sensible about this. Let's make this easier. And also medical abortion pills will be increasing access to them as well. So my staff has another follow-up call with the White House just today, so we're fully supportive of these efforts. Also, that's another reason why we made sure abortion was covered under insurance in New York State. These are not free to perform. We want to make sure the insurance companies know their responsibility, as well as creating our protections for doctors. There will be cases. There'll be cases that come when aggressive individuals from other states, especially those that have the private right of action, which is still surreal to anticipate that there could be vigilantes out there hunting down women, and that trail may lead them to New York. It may lead them to one of our providers, and our law, as written, it will protect them from extradition, will protect their rights. But again, this is uncharted territory, my friends. It's uncharted territory. So we'll be finding out what they do, and we're ready to counter. So I anticipate this is going to go on for a long time. But I want you to know, we're going to continue our marketing campaign so people understand it's still legal here in New York. Talking to providers, there are people coming in saying, oh, I heard abortion was now illegal. So one would think, why we have to do this in New York? Because people don't know. They're watching the news. Roe v. Wade is overturned. So you can understand where they're coming from. So we're out there again reminding you that it's safe, legal, accessible always. And that's that's part of our public awareness campaign that is out there. So there's other options, take care of the providers, remind people of their rights, take care of the insurance, take care of coverage, and to the businesses who have employees in those states, whether they're New York City based, New York State based, they have branches, operations elsewhere, or they're headquartered elsewhere, and all of a sudden having an awakening, I'll call it, that they actually have maybe a certain percentage of their workforce are women who all of a sudden have no rights to determine their own health care decisions. So I wrote an op-ed back May 12th, I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal encouraging these businesses to rethink where they are. Do you really want to be in that kind of state that is hostile to not just women's rights, but telegraphed by Clarence Thomas, possibly hostile to LGBTQ rights and marriage equality and even contraception? So that's not us standing here thinking of the world's worst case scenarios. That is written by a Supreme Court justice. So that is the world we're living in here. And we need to be prepared. So I put the message out to businesses that you're going to have problems with your workforce if you don't have these services available, or you want to just come on back to New York. We'll take good care of you. So we did an op-ed. We actually published a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal, May 16th. I just said, this is a statement of our values. This was in the newspaper. And here's a phone number, Empire State Development. Give us a call. We'd like to talk to you. We'd like to talk to you as you go forward, because, short of a change in the Supreme Court, they're all pretty young. I don't know that we're going to see this change at the federal level anytime soon. And what could actually happen at the federal level? Again, I'm not going to ever feel like I was Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, because I said that about abortion rights in 2016, that this could happen. And it was like, oh, really? It happened. It happened. Outcome of a presidential election, we end up at the Supreme Court with justices that are hostile to human rights. I'd have to just say the human rights. So we saw this coming, but this is going to be with us for a while. I don't see this changing for a long time. And there could also be a national ban on abortion. And that is what we have to be talking about now. Again, not us trying to come up with scary doomsday scenarios. That is what Mitch McConnell has telegraphed to us. So that is what happens in elections starting as early 4 months from now. So New Yorkers, Americans, be aware. Be aware. If you want to live in a country that is hostile to your rights, don't complain about it. You don't like that idea, do something about it. And so we'll be talking about that as well. So companies that are enlightened, we encourage you to come here. Know that your employees have rights here that they may be not having in other rights. And so it is a frightening time, but it's in our DNA as New Yorkers to fight. We're hardwired to fight. We fight back hard. We anticipate scenarios, we prepare for them, we adapt to changing circumstances, and that's why I'm going to keep in touch with the providers and people all across the state to hear, what are you seeing on the ground? What else do you need from us? How bad is it? And what are you hearing from across this country? Because New York State will always be a safe harbor. So with that, I will be happy to introduce Dr. Mary Bassett to talk to us about the work that she's doing. And again, my gratitude to her is undying for what she has had to step into and the work that she does.
Thank you so much, Governor. I have to say, I mean, it's such an honor to work for somebody who is so courageous and unflinching. So thank you, Governor Hochul, for all that you do. And as you've heard, we've just had a really rich conversation with healthcare providers at our roundtable conversation. This is the beginning of a dialogue that we are committed to maintaining as we work in partnership with doctors and nurses and administrators who provide abortion care services for New Yorkers. And we in New York are very much aware of the important role that we play in the nation. And our commitment is not only to the residents of New York, for whom we obviously have a key responsibility, but to the whole of this country. We know that there are 26 states which are expected to ban abortion on demand, and there may even be more. Many of these states have no exception to abortion, even for rape and incest. And all of you have heard the really terrifying story of a 10-year-old rape victim who had to travel out of state to end a pregnancy that was a threat to her health, as well as obviously something that she shouldn't have been required to receive anything but immediate and dignified care. So we had feared this reality, but as Governor Hochul has said, she called upon us way back in May to begin preparing for it. We know that this is not simply a human rights issue, which frankly is enough. It's also a health care issue. The data are compelling that as the United States has restricted its access to abortion, something that began way before ending Roe, which happened, hard to believe, just 2 weeks ago. But the restrictions began years ago and have occurred in parallel with the increase in maternal mortality. The United States has the unenviable position of having the highest maternal mortality rates of wealthy nations, and that has occurred in concert with the loss of abortion access. You've heard that we have made funds available to abortion providers. We've established a abortion provider support fund. 13 organizations have contracts. They offer collectively services in 63 clinics across the state, and $10 million is being contracted with them to expand their services. As the governor has explained, an additional $15 million will become available in what we're calling phase 2, and this will become available to a broader array of providers. We expect the solicitation announcement to go out in the coming week. So this is part of ensuring that we have support to expanded access in New York State, and that we will continue to remain committed to maintaining abortion services. You know, I've often talked about the importance of health to human rights, but the right to bodily autonomy is absolutely key to health, as well as a key right for all women and for all people who become pregnant. So we must continue to ensure, and in collaboration with the providers with whom we've just been meeting, we will continue to pursue opportunities to expand those. We're talking about increasing access to contraception, which scarily the Supreme Court Justice indicated, Clarence Thomas indicated, might be in his sights and may be an additional effort that we have to undertake to protect contraceptive access. And we also need to make sure that we play our role nationally. You all know that I've talked about my personal experience with abortion. And I think many of us who always considered this a personal matter, which I certainly do, have felt that it's important that we step forward and destigmatize abortion and make sure that women understand that this is something that they have a right to. Every person, every woman, every girl who comes to New York seeking an abortion should know that they continue to have these rights here. And with the support of our governor, we will continue to protect those in every way we have. We hope that other departments and states will join us in some of these efforts. And I want to thank again the many providers who've joined us today for all that they do every day on the front lines. So with that, let me introduce Caitlin Doyle, who is the Director of Women's Health Programs at the Long Island Jewish Medical Center. Caitlin, please join us for some brief remarks, and thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Bassett, for the introduction, and thank you, Governor Hochul, for convening providers here today who are pleased to receive this grant as part of the first phase of the Abortion Provider Support Fund. We are so humbled for the opportunity to share the emerging challenges for healthcare and the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. Although many in the field have been preparing for years, the consequences are expansive, complex, and will further exacerbate inequities facing our most vulnerable communities. Today's conversation with colleagues across the city, Westchester, Long Island, demonstrate our shared commitment to provide increased access and safety to individuals seeking comprehensive health care at this critical time while seeking innovations for the future. We deeply appreciate the governor's initiative to protect reproductive rights and abortion care in New York State. We will not go back. Thank you. Thank you, Governor Hochul.
We'll be back to take some questions from the press momentarily. All right. Thank you. Any questions? Actually, I mean that. It's nice to see everybody. All right. Good to see you, Peter.
Questions. Why do you see the need to make New York a safe harbor? And why should New York State taxpayers be paying for care for women from out of state?
Well, first of all, it's who we are. We've always respected people's rights. We are the birthplace of the women's rights movement, for example. So I consider this part of our history. It's part of our DNA. And these are basic human rights. The right to make a decision about whether or not you want to continue a pregnancy. That is deeply personal. That is up to a woman, not to the Supreme Court and not to your state government. So we are going to continue leaning into these rights. And if they start coming after marriage equality, that is another fight we'll take on, because we are the birthplace of the LGBTQ movement. So regardless of what it is, New Yorkers have always stood up, and I'm not relinquishing that moral responsibility we have as New Yorkers. As far as taxpayer dollars, right now, women coming from other states to secure health care and abortion can be treated here in New York State. So we're simply saying we need to ramp up the services to make sure that New York women can get what they need while we're expecting an influx of other individuals coming here. So these are providers already doing the work. We are not paying for transportation to come from other states. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about ramping up the services provided to New Yorkers, but also for those who happen to be here. We'll make the effort to come here, that they're covered as well.
Governor, I wanted to ask you about the bodega owner who has not been charged, or rather has been charged with murder when he was defending himself, the Jose Alba case. What do you make of that? Obviously, you have the power to remove the DA in certain situations. Do you feel as though that's warranted in this case? And another part of this now, they're not charging the girlfriend who stabbed the bodega.
I'm going to continue working with our local authorities, namely the mayor and NYPD, offering any assistance I can to deal with a major challenge, which is public safety. My job as governor, number one, is to keep people safe and do anything I can with my responsibilities to ensure that that is the outcome. So we'll work with people, but I hear people's pain. I know there's a lot of anxiety out there. I don't need to read a poll. I walk the streets. I talk to people. So this is very real. And I want New Yorkers to know we are committed, as we have been tackling gun violence, not related to a knifing case, but there is a lot of anxiety about gun violence out there. And we are doing everything we can, despite the Supreme Court and despite the fact that there are a lot of pressures and voices against what we're doing. We're going to continue to stand up and protect New Yorkers.
Just a quick follow-up, though, if I could. I mean, specifically in this case, does it send the right message to charge him with murder?
It's not the role of the governor to make those local decisions. We have a form of government where there's a state level. Also, these rights are delegated to locals. So my opinion is this: we need to continue to do more to protect New Yorkers in this state. That is the extent of it. That is my involvement. I will continue to have the resources out there. I'll work in partnership. I have a task force that works in concert with the state. But this is a local governance decision, whether it's New York City, whether it's Albany, whether it's Syracuse, whether it's Rochester. These are local decisions, and I want to focus on the larger picture where I have a major role to play, and that is to make sure that we support these entities. If they need resources, they need assistance from us. That is my role, to look at this globally, holistically, and make sure that we address the very real fears that people have about their public safety.
Governor, think about the gun laws that you mentioned. You said there might be more later this week. They're already challenged upstate in court. I was wondering, do you think they will hold up in court? Did you expect these kind of challenges, or was the law maybe rushed through too quickly?
We worked very intentionally with top legal minds around this country to craft legislation working with the legislature to ensure that it met all constitutional requirements and thresholds. We passed a law that we believe is constitutionally sound. That's why we'll defend it. And it was not rushed, other than the fact that the Supreme Court didn't give us a lot of time when, like this, they took away the right of the governor to protect the people of her state under a law that had been in place for over 100 years. So we had to respond quickly, because otherwise there'd be chaos, and people would think that because they had a permit that they now can carry it concealed on our subways, in our schools, our city parks. You know, we had to take strong action, but we're always anticipating. Our administration has a sharp legal team and a policy team and a legislative team. We anticipated we could have problems if the Supreme Court went a certain way. As the time was ticking down, we drafted legislation and we got it over the finish line in rapid speed, but that does not mean that this was not a very solid, sound piece of legislation that we will defend and be successful with defending in court.
Governor, how might ongoing negotiations with Mayor Adams affect the implementation of the class size bill passed by state lawmakers?
I didn't hear the question. How might
Negotiations with the mayor affect the implementation?
Well, there's conversations. This is something, you know, people I'm working with, negotiation sounds adversarial. I have conversations with people, and we've been talking about this since the end of session when, you know, this was a little bit of surprise at the end, the way it was crafted. So we've been looking at that legislation and having conversations with the mayor's team. So we'll resolve this. We'll get to,
What's the scope of possibility here? Is it, you know, a wholesale, one-year delay of implementation? Is it based on where the specific schools that might have it implemented, but not at other schools? You know, what's kind of in the cards on the table?
We're having conversations. I think you all know me well enough. It's only been less than a year, but I don't negotiate anything and talk about specifics, and I'm working with other individuals to get to the right conclusion. So there are conversations with other individuals affected, obviously the schools themselves, the teachers. There's a lot of people involved in these conversations. It's important. School size is very important to me, making sure that kids get the very best education possible, especially in the aftermath of what we've dealt with, which is a loss of learning almost exclusively for 2 years because of the pandemic. So we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. But again, I don't just jump to conclusions. I do it based on data. My decision making will always be sound based on the circumstances, the data, and we're having those conversations right now. I have more time to deal with this because I had 1,007 bills, record number of bills passed, landed on my desk, or within the realm of being on my desk over the last few weeks. And so we are dealing with the ones that had a deadline. You know, mayoral control comes to mind. June 30th expiration, we had to deal with that. So we are focused on the ones that had to be dealt with immediately, and we've segregated out the ones that we have conversations about to get to a right decision that everybody's going to be satisfied with. But I have until December 31st. Just want to put that out there. For all the bills, they will all be done by December 31st.
Expectation this will be resolved through a chapter amendment?
That's a possibility as well. I mean, every bill has been passed has the possibility of having a chapter amendment. Yes, that is true. That is a broad, yes, that is a statement of fact that every bill can be chaptered.
Governor, a bill, speaking of bills awaiting your signature, a bill that would restore independence to the Public Authorities Control Board is currently awaiting your signature. Lawmakers and good government groups are calling on you to sign it before the board votes on Penn Station, which could occur as early as this summer. So given the upcoming deadline for that vote, will you commit to looking at that and making a decision or signing it before the PACB votes on the Penn Station?
I'm not constrained by artificial deadlines that are devised by other people. I have December 31st as my hard deadline. Everything will be resolved by December 31st. Everything requires a thoughtful response. I need to take the time to work with my team and people affected and come up with the right answers. That's my number one job. Well, one of my major jobs as governor is to be thoughtful, and a lot of bills came through. 1,000 bills were passed. An extraordinary number of bills were passed. And I'm going to focus and make sure we get to the right decision on every single one of them.
Follow up quickly. I mean, lawmakers say they feel constrained by the current statute of the PACB, which, as you know, its independence was rolled back by your predecessor. I mean, do you worry about the optics that this Penn plan could be voted on by a board that feels they're not given latitude to appropriately vote on the project?
I'll simply point out they passed the law that everyone's complaining about.
Governor, one more bill question for you. The wrongful death statute is going to be coming to your desk at some point as well. Have you taken a look at that? There's business leaders urging you to veto it, and then on the other side, of course, there are people pushing to see you sign it.
I'm aware of the arguments, and I will have to be a broken record for all of you during this process. I know there's a lot of interest, pressure, advocacy groups. Everybody's all anxious about the signings. All the bills will be resolved in a thoughtful way that is best for New Yorkers, all by the end of the year. Some will be done this summer. I have regular meetings with my teams for briefing based on policies. I guess there is time to do this. There is absolutely time. There's a current law related to that in place and has been there for many, many decades. And so there's not a deadline that I feel the pressure to deal with on that one. So, thank you, bud.
Can I ask you a COVID question?
Sure.
Should you and the state officials be more vocal about masking and boosting? You talk about hospitalizations. They're up dramatically over the past few months. So should there be more talk about masking and boosting?
You know, Dr. Bassett, if you have anything to comment on that, we give our numbers out every single day. I mean, we have information. And the number one bit of information that's out there that I don't think there's a single New Yorker who doesn't know, that they have available to them a vaccination. They also know they can get tested. Test kits, when there was a scarcity of them, and there was a lot of anxiety around this, was a different time than we're dealing with right now. And people know what's available to them. We can always ramp up. We can always do more. We can let people know our numbers, but I also appreciate the role of the press in letting people know the dynamics of what's going on. Based on the press, we release literally every day or two. You know, we give out the numbers on what the circumstances are. But Dr. Bassett, anything else we should be doing?
No.
Yeah.
Well, just at the risk of sounding like a broken record, let me just repeat that we need people to get vaccinated. Anybody who is over the age of 5 should receive 3 vaccines, the primary course and a booster. Anyone who's over 50 should receive 4, the primary course and 2 boosters. And we now have approval for the littlest kids, 6 months and older, whose number of shots will vary with the type of formulation. So we've done really well as a state. We have over 3/4 of the population fully vaccinated, but we still have further to go. And it's this that, in spite of rising numbers of infections related to increasingly contagious variants, mortality has remained low. And that is a key public health goal to save lives. And vaccination is clearly the pathway to that. And earlier, of course, the governor spoke about our call line for the rest of state, 188-TREAT-NY, so that people who are over 65 and test positive should, or if you have any underlying diseases, should use that number if they don't know how to access treatment. So, so that's really all of the tools continue to be very important as COVID transmission continues and remains a part of life.
I have another question for Dr. Bassett. Dr. Bassett, how many of the new shipment, or for the governor, how many of the new shipment of monkeypox vaccines are for New York City? You mentioned Suffolk.
No, I have the number. Let's see. What it pops? Let's see.
It's about 14,000.
I think it was 14,000.
So there was
New York City.
number that was mentioned earlier.
That was the first tranche. The second tranche, which is about 20,000 doses for the state, is about 14,500 for New York City, and the remainder for the rest of state. New York City gets its allocation from the federal government, independently. The federal government makes up those numbers. And the demand, as you know, is high, and New York City has the highest number of cases in the nation.
That is 1450 for the city, directly from CDC, and 5180 for the rest of the state. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming out.